Chapter 31. Alice had heard the commotion in the courtyard below her window in the keep tower, shouts and horses' hoofbeats ringing off the cobbles. She had reached the window in time to see 3 horsemen galloping full pelt for the portcullis gate. She recognized Will instantly, and, even as she watched, she saw his snap shot that sent a crossbowman tumbling from the castle walls. Behind him rode 2 other men, one of them swaying in the saddle as if he were barely conscious. With a start of surprise, she recognized Ormond. What on earth was he doing? Obviously, from the way the guards had reacted, he was escaping from his own castle, yet the very idea was ridiculous. And Will was with him. She frowned. There was no sign that Will was acting under any duress. He was leading the way, in fact. For a moment she toyed with the possibility that Ormond really was a black magician and had placed some kind of spell or compulsion on Will. Then she dismissed the thought. Like most educated people, she didn't really believe in sorcery or magic. Yet, what other explanation could there be? She remained by the window for a few minutes later. A party of mounted men set out in pursuit. Her first instinct was to dress and hurry downstairs to find out what was going on. Then she stopped and sat down, fingers drumming on the table as she thought. Lady Gwendolen wouldn't behave in such a fashion. Lady Gwendolen was an empty-headed, self-obsessed twitterer who wouldn't take the slightest interest in anything that didn't involve new hairstyles, shoes, or fashions. She rose and moved to the door leading to the anteroom of her suite. Her 2 maids were chatting quietly as they folded and put away a pile of freshly laundered clothes. Max was sitting in a corner, frowning over a manuscript. All 3 looked up in surprise at her sudden appearance. She motioned impatiently for them to relax. Sit down, she said. Perching on the arm of a chair, she continued, Lord Ormond and the Jongleur Barton just rode out of the castle, pursued by an armed party. The 3 looked at her in surprise. They might be servants, but they were privy to her real identity and mission, and they knew Will's real identity as well. Max, go down to the main hall and see what you can find out. Don't make it too obvious. Just nose around and see what you can hear. Very good, my lady. He rose and moved to the door, picking up his soft feathered bonnet from the side table as he went. She could tell the 2 maids were aching to ask her more, but she shook her head at them and returned to her chamber to wait for Max's report. Time passed slowly, painfully slowly. Max returned after an hour or so. His eavesdropping revealed no more of the facts than Alice already knew. The castle was abuzz with the fact that, for some reason, Lord Ormond, his secretary, and the jongleur Barton had broken out and ridden away. Everyone seems as puzzled as we are, my lady, Max told her. Alice began pacing back and forth, deep in thought. Max, uncertain as to whether she wanted him to do anything more, coughed hesitantly. Will that be all, my lady? He prompted, and she turned to him apologetically. Of course, Max. Thank you. You can go. He had barely left her chamber when there was another knock. Come in, she called, and was surprised when the door opened to admit Sir Karen. Why, Sir Karen, she said, what a delightful surprise. Won't you come in? Then, raising her voice, she called to the outer room. Max, fetch us some wine, please. The good Gallic white, I think. Outside, Max hurried to the side table to fetch the wine, while Karen came into the room, looking around, taking in the clutter of gowns, headpieces, makeup, and shoes that Lady Gwendolen surrounded herself with. Alice indicated a chair by the fire. I'm sorry to bother you, Lady Gwendolen, Karen began, but I wondered if you heard a bit of the commotion an hour or so ago. Why, as a matter of fact, I did, she said. Horses galloping and men shouting. Who were they? Robbers? Or brigands, perhaps? Karen was shaking his head sadly. Worse than that, my lady. Far worse. I'm afraid they were traitors to the crown. Alice sat back, her mouth a perfect O of surprise. For a moment she considered revealing her true identity and purpose to Karen. After all, he seemed like a solid type, and she knew Will had been on the point of asking him into his confidence. But some instinct stopped her. Traitors, Sir Karen? Here, in Massendor? How terrifying! Is the castle safe? She added the last question with a slight look of alarm on her face. Karen hurried to reassure her. "Oh, quite safe, my lady. We have everything under control, but I'm afraid this is serious news. Lord Ormond was one of them." "Lord Ormond?" she said. Karen nodded somberly. "Apparently he's been scheming to hand over the castle to the Scotty army before spring, and the Jongleur Barton was working hand in glove with him." "No, he's—" Alice began before she could stop herself, but Karen interrupted her. "I'm afraid so. Apparently he's been passing messages to the Scotty for Lord Ormond for the past 3 weeks, even before he arrived here." Alice's mouth snapped shut. She could believe what he had said about Ormond. It was quite possible that the strange temporary commander could be in league with the Scotty. But why would Karen lie about Will's role in the treachery? She realized that Karen was waiting for some sort of reaction from her. "But he had such a nice singing voice," she said. She thought it was a sort of vacuous reply Lady Gwendolen would make. Karen's eyebrows rose slightly. Doubtless he thought so too. "Nevertheless, my lady, he is a spy. I felt it best to keep you informed, as I'm sure you were puzzled about the commotion in the courtyard." "Indeed I was, Sir Karen, and I thank you for your thoughtfulness. I shall be—" Whatever it was that she was about to be was interrupted by a further knocking at the door. "Come in," Karen called. That was a little presumptuous of him, she thought, and not quite in keeping with the solicitous knight who had come to reassure her. She was beginning to have doubts about Sir Karen. The latch rattled, and the door was thrown open rather violently. A man entered, limping heavily. She could see his right thigh had been roughly bandaged. He was obviously looking for Sir Karen, because as he entered, he reported immediately. "They got away, blast them. They went into that blasted forest." He turned toward Alice, and she couldn't suppress a start of surprise. John Buddle.